Welcome to Mom Breaks. In this episode, we talk with Jigyna Patel. Jigyna is a South Asian mother of 3 daughters based in Houston, Texas. She's a passionate maternal mental health advocate, inspired from her personal journey through perinatal challenges. She had fertility struggles with polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS, a traumatic first birth experience that was followed with postpartum depression, anxiety, and undiagnosed postpartum psychosis. She later had twins, a surprise twin pregnancy, and she also had some depression and anxiety after that delivery. All of these experiences have shaped her mission to break the silence around maternal mental health and inspired her to volunteer with various organizations, including Postpartum Support International, or PSI. She serves in multiple roles, including a Houston local chapter member, a Hindu support coordinator, a peer mentor, postpartum psychosis task force member, and an education and training chair for PSI Texas. She works as a support group trainer and lead facilitator coach for group peer support, and also works with the Policy Center for Maternal Mental Health. Jigyna reflects on how amazing her support system was through her birth experiences and how she's still suffered from PMADs. She talks about the importance of sleep, using your voice to advocate for yourself, and supporting each other as moms on a lifelong roller coaster ride. Jigyna brings deep wisdom from her lived and professional experiences as a mental health advocate, offering insights on postpartum planning, giving space for continued ups and downs, and the power of community in healing. Let's jump in.
My name is Jigyna. I am a South Asian mom. I live in Houston, Texas. I have 3 girls. My background career-wise is in public relations and event planning. But about 11 years ago, when I had my firstborn, I went through postpartum depression, anxiety, and psychosis. That completely changed my life. 5 years ago, I had a surprise twin pregnancy, which was another event in itself. Through pregnancy, I went through depression, and then afterwards, I went through depression and anxiety again. Soon after that, I discovered Postpartum Support International. I was looking for help myself, but I was also 1 year post my delivery and recovery from my own postpartum depression after the twins. So I was wanting to give back and I found PSI. I was excited to see a platform that had so much available for families, moms, professionals, and I dove in. I got involved as a support group facilitator, as a peer mentor, a Houston support coordinator. And then in the process, I decided to go back to work as a maternal mental health advocate and peer supporter. So since then, I have gotten my PMHC and ACHW community health worker certification, and also a support group facilitator certification. I would love to go back and get a master's in counseling and become a therapist, but for now, my girls are little, and I love the advocacy and the peer support work I'm doing. So that's where I'm at now. It was my postpartum journey that has created a life full of purpose and work that I love for the first time. And I can't imagine doing anything else anymore.
That is amazing. I am excited to follow your journey, and I want that master's for you too. if
Oh,
if
thank you.
if
I
it
know.
continues to be a dream. Can you share more about the support groups that you facilitate?
Yes, sure. When I first started with PSI about 3 years ago, I facilitated support groups for South Asian moms, particularly moms of Indian descent or Pakistani or, South Asian. And then I also did support groups for moms of multiples. And that's the support group that I did for almost 2 years. And I just recently had to give that project away because I had more things coming on my plate. But I loved doing those support groups for PSI. That's actually where I found healing for my postpartum journey that I thought I had healed from, but I had not. In the support groups that I was facilitating, I learned there was so much that I had shut closed, never completely talked about or felt, and even felt safe to admit during those support groups. I also realized this is happening to so many different types of women, regardless of their background, race, religion. Those were the two support groups that I initially did. And then I started working for an organization called Group Peer Support. And through them, I started to do support groups for anybody who's going through mental health challenges in general. And now they are starting a new support group for moms, which I'll be facilitating starting in November on a weekly basis. And I also help organizations. I train them how to run support groups based on GPS's particular model. I truly believe in the power of support groups for families and mothers with postpartum, any sort of postpartum mental health issues. That support group or peer support is unparalleled to anything else that they'll encounter in their journey of healing. So I'm a huge proponent of support groups.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of those risk factors, social support, that's totally modifiable. And a group that is catered to the struggles you're going through is just, it can be really powerful. Do you have like consulting that you offer, or are you working all under groups peer support?
I do contract work with group peer support, and then I do all my volunteer work with PSI, Postpartum Support International. And I also do a little bit of contract work with the Policy Center for Maternal Mental Health. These are projects that have come to me over the years. And last year, I actually, how could I forget, did support groups locally here in Houston at a hospital, Methodist hospital. And I did monthly support groups for moms and families going through any postpartum mental health and for new families. And that was in person. I did that for a year as well. So I'm taking on
Hmm.
projects as, they're coming to me as things that I'm reading and learning about. And it works with pretty much my schedule because I am a mom of three young kids in the sense that my husband works about 50 to 60 hours a week. So it's just me
Yeah,
throughout the week. So I'm doing a little bit of contract work, but it's been in the peer support field.
amazing. Wow, so much rich experience. I'll link groups peer support
Yes.
in the show notes so people can know how they could reach out or join a group.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so we're already talking about it, but I want to hear about 2014 when you had your first child. What was going on for you? Any major stressors or life changes?
So I had gotten married in 2008 and
Mm.
we waited till 2010 to start getting pregnant. And right away, it wasn't happening. And 2011 rolled around and I changed my OB because my initial OB didn't feel as serious or receptive to how I'd been trying for a year. And then my new OB was like, let's do some blood work, let's do some tests. I found out in my late 20s, early 30s, I have PCOS. And turns out that I've probably had it for most of my 20s because I had an irregular period. And it all made sense. I had all the other symptoms of PCOS, but had never been diagnosed with it until I tried to get pregnant. Once we found that out, she was like, let's get you to a fertility doctor. That first year of going to the fertility doctor was really hard because all I knew about fertility was IVF. And I was afraid and scared and did not want to go that route. But I also, was learning about PCOS. And so we decided to go the fertility route. My doctor at the time was like, let's start you with an IUI. She explained what that was. I thought it was only IVF. I learned what all the different stages of fertility there were. Getting pregnant was really tough. It took almost 3 years from starting to end till I got pregnant. And I got pregnant with the very first IUI, which I was very thankful for. But that 3 years getting there was tough. Once I got pregnant, I was very anxious and afraid that something would go wrong because how could I not get pregnant naturally? 3 years of wondering and thinking and getting older, and I have PCOS. And so I wasn't 100% trusting of my pregnancy. I was constantly stressed out and worried. Leading up to getting married and this pregnancy, I was a very confident person, but I lost a lot of that throughout my pregnancy. I also had a sister who had a son, and I was around my nephew when he was born. So I was like, I know exactly what to do when this baby comes. My only big worry was that my husband and I had just gotten a small business. And so he was fully dedicated to that. The whole pregnancy, I was like, we have to get employees. We were both working it. I had actually quit my career and my job when I couldn't get pregnant and I started fertility and I started working with him. And so I was like, who is going to help me? You have to go back to work. Nobody else can be at our business. And so we got some family lined up to help so he could be with me for about a week after I delivered. But I knew that it would be my mom and my mother-in-law. And that's part of the South Asian culture. My older sister did it. Some of my cousins did it. So I was like, okay, I'll have the two moms after my husband goes back to work 2 weeks later, and I should be fine. Through the pregnancy, I had already entered it very drained and stressed from the fertility aspect of it. And then I started it worried that something is going to go wrong because how could I get pregnant with just one IUI? And then started the worry of, all right, what's going to happen after? Because now we're finally here, but okay, I'll have my mom's helping me, but we don't have an employee at our business. And that's fine. I should be okay, but am I going to be okay? So all of that was happening while I was pregnant.
That is a lot. What type of business
We
were you
own
running?
yeah, we still have it actually. Oh my goodness, like 16 years in. It's a small wine and spirit store. It's here in North Houston. We took it from when it was just a little bitty business and turned it around, and it's become our life. It's exactly where we need it at the time, and we're still doing it even now. When we were first starting off, everything happened together. We got married, we got our small business, and we were like, okay, let's get pregnant at the fertility. So,
Yeah.
you know, I did not realize when I was pregnant, all of this was more risk factors. It took me many years to learn that all of this had a role in what happened to me afterwards.
Yeah. Okay, I have follow-up questions. What did PCOS look like for you? You said irregular periods. What else?
I had the acne, the weight gain, the facial hair on my face, and the irregular periods.
Okay. And then what was it like having your mom and mother-in-law?
I thought it was going to be great, but personally, it was half and half. They were some of the reasons why a lot of my symptoms matriculated as much as they did, but they were
Okay.
also my saving grace in taking care
Yeah.
of my child because I got to the point where I couldn't take care of her after I
Yeah.
delivered. All of their push and pull for me to get better got me more depressed and stressed. But
Oh,
it was a blessing in disguise to have them there because I could not take care of my child as sick
yeah.
as I got as the weeks progressed. So, I'm thankful for it. And since then, I have educated them and continue to do so because at the time they didn't know what was happening. And even when I got diagnosed with postpartum depression, they were not understanding of it. Depression and mental health
Mm.
has a lot of stigma in the South Asian culture.
Oh,
And since then, I've educated them and kept them in the know about this is these are real illnesses. What I suffered with and struggled with it was justified and I needed treatment and it took a while to get it. It wasn't my weakness. It wasn't me giving up or giving in. I was actually
mm.
suffering.
Can you say more on the culture around mental health?
The South Asian culture, mental health in general, has a lot of stigma. Women in particular, they are known as the caretakers. They are known as
Mm.
the do all. Like you wanted to be a mom and you're going to be a mom and you're going to be able to do it all even afterwards. If you're not feeling great, you're feeling sad, that's fine, but just keep going. Why should you feel sad? Having a family is such a blessing. And having kids, that is your role, that is your job. I mean, these are things that me and my sisters never saw my mom talk about being sad or upset or depressed until much later. We always had our relatives and our aunts, just they were just constantly like, they go to work, the women go to work and they take care of the kids and no me time. And so I never saw it. I had a little bit of depression in college. And at the time, it was the first time I talked to my sisters about it, but never my family. And then after I had my firstborn, I went into full blown postpartum depression, anxiety, psychosis. And they were just like, this is normal. This is a big life change. It's just maybe 10 or 15 days and you'll be fine. You just need to take care of the baby, be around the baby, breastfeed, you'll be fine. They didn't know as much either. Since then, I've learned in the last 10 years that mental health is becoming more of a conversation, finally, in the South Asian culture. The newer generation is talking more about it. And allowing their parents to learn about it, and their parents are speaking up about it. So we're finally heading towards the right way, but it's taken a long time.
I celebrate any talking about mental health across the world. Like, we need to talk about it. How would you compare the depression you experienced earlier in your life to the postpartum depression you had?
So in college, it was over trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And I was getting a degree that I didn't want to, and the pressure of, am I
Oh,
going to have a job after I graduate? And it was like 2 or 3 weeks of just not being able to, the symptoms, staying in bed, crying all day, didn't want to
Mhm.
do anything I enjoyed. And at the time, one of my sisters helped me and pulled me out. I had a cousin who helped me and pulled me out. Then I just started to find things and went back to my old ways. It was very short lived, 2 or 3 weeks. The symptoms were crying, staying in bed, not feeling like myself. Postpartum, it was everything, anything you can imagine that can happen happens from the moment I delivered till up to a year and a half later almost is when I felt fully recovered.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's obviously different as a young adult to a mom with a newborn.
Yes.
That makes sense. How would you describe your support network as you were going into your first birth?
So that was the other thing. I thought that I am fully supported. I have my mom, my mom-in-law, my two sisters live nearby. My husband, he's there. Our business was very close, 10 minutes away from the house, so he's there if anything is needed. I had two of my best friends who were like, "Oh, we're going to check in on you." I had cousins living nearby. I had a great support system, and I still went through all of it. And
Yeah.
that is another big point that I bring up, that it's okay if you do go through it, even with your support system. And FYI, you can go through it even with a support system. So, for providers, they need to be on the lookout that if they hear a mom saying what I said at the time, doesn't mean she's good to go.
Right.
There are other risk factors that my OB or GP never caught for me.
Yeah. What are some of the risk factors you're thinking about?
Yeah, in my pregnancy, I had the pre-pregnancy fertility issues. I
Hmm.
had PCOS. Then I had pregnancy anxiety and stress of who's going to be there
Hmm.
afterwards. And then I
Yeah.
had the traumatic birth. My traumatic
Ah,
birth was probably the biggest thing that took me into immediate depression and anxiety, and psychosis followed. You never know which one comes first when you are struggling with a few different postpartum disorders. But
right. All right. I wanted to jump in on risk factors in this conversation. We covered an umbrella review, which is basically a review of systematic reviews, back in Kendra's episode. I'm going to just speak to that same umbrella review here. This looked at 21 studies on risk factors for postpartum depression. These were studies from 1996 through 2016. And across these studies, researchers found 25 statistically significant risk factors, plus two that were inconclusive. The most common were high life stress, lack of social support, current or past abuse, prenatal depression, and partner or marital dissatisfaction. And the strongest predictors were prenatal depression and current abuse. So that's your mood in pregnancy is a great indicator of how you will likely feel postpartum, which seems obvious, but I didn't connect that before reading through this and sort of getting in the literature that mood in pregnancy is important to get on top of and get medication or therapy or whatever supports you need before baby's there to get ahead of mood and anxiety disorders. Another layer is that women with polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS, also face an elevated risk. I'll link one large review that found that the likelihood of postpartum depression was about 45% higher in women with PCOS compared to those without, and that this risk isn't explained by demographic variables or pregnancy complications. So it seems like they're not totally sure beyond, there's some association. They think maybe there's a hormonal or metabolic factors that play a role. And there's more that we don't know. Across these reviews, I'll just note that most of this is showing an association, not cause and effect. So these are patterns, not necessarily like guarantees. Like, right, that's what a risk is. When it comes to postpartum psychosis specifically, one recent review found that the most established risk factors for psychosis in the postpartum period include a personal history of bipolar disorder, and the estimated risk there is 17%. 17% may develop postpartum psychosis, and that risk is higher if someone has bipolar 1 versus bipolar 2. And then another risk factor is having a history of postpartum psychosis. So for them, this systematic review found a 29% chance of relapse in a subsequent pregnancy. Broader research has shown that having a family history of psychiatric disorders does increase the odds of developing perinatal psychiatric conditions, which makes sense. So if your sister has experienced postpartum psychosis, your own risk might be higher. Some research has looked at polygenic risk scores, which are basically how someone's overall genetic makeup aligns with known risk genes for something like depression or other disorders. And in this review, they spotlight how women with bipolar disorder have had a higher genetic risk score for major depression than people without psychiatric illness. And yet, women with first onset postpartum psychosis, so those with no prior psychiatric history who did not develop bipolar, afterwards, they didn't differ from the control group in their genetic liability for depression. So postpartum psychosis that emerges as part of bipolar disorder may share genetic roots with depression, according to this review. But first onset postpartum psychosis seems to be its own thing, arising through different biological pathways, potentially. Let's get back to Jigyna's birth story.
So I actually was, due to deliver on a certain date. It came and went, and then they scheduled a induction. And so the night before the induction, I had very minor contractions. I went in and we were there at midnight. It was supposed to be induced. And then when they kind of got everything hooked up and they were checking my baby's heartbeat, they saw that it was dropping rapidly. So right then and there, they said, we need to take you to an emergency C-section. I had only planned for a vaginal delivery, a little bit of epidural. I knew very little about C-sections, let alone emergency C-section. And the night before, my doctor, my OB, was not available. So an on-call doctor was going to deliver me.
Oh, okay.
I was, okay, that's fine, But then when the emergency C-section happened, everything was like fast motion and slow motion at once. Nobody was telling me how badly my daughter's heart rate had dropped. Only my husband knew, and I could see him turning pale and really scared. They were telling me, it's fine, it's fine. But then they took me into the OR, put me on medication, but it didn't kick in, and they started surgery. I felt the whole procedure. The tugging, the pulling, I was crying throughout it. When they pulled out my baby, she had her cord wrapped around her neck twice. And she was not crying, black and blue, and the cord had shriveled. Eventually, I heard her cry, but it was so traumatic. And when I came out of the delivery room, then I got into the recovery room and they brought me the baby. I was just crying. I was trying to tell my husband what happened. This was all happening in the early morning hours. One of my best friends, she drove in that day and to the hospital. And 2 days before my daughter was born was my birthday. I had sent my best friend a picture of me and my husband because we'd gone to lunch. And she was like, this was 2 days ago. And look at you now. She's like, what happened? Are you okay? I was like, no, I'm not okay. And she's like, your color was drained. You had under eye circles. You looked deathly sickly. And from 2 days ago to your post birth, what happened? And I was just like, this is what happened, my birth. And for 2-3 days, that's all I could talk about. But nobody at the hospital asked me about the birth. The nurses, not the doctors, nobody came in to check in about this emergency C-section. I went to my OB 2 weeks later and told her what happened. And she's like, oh, it's fine. You'll be fine. It's okay. And I couldn't stop talking about how I was so
Traumatic.
traumatized by that birth. And that's when my symptoms started within those 2 first weeks.
Yeah.
I was just so upset. I couldn't sleep. I was crying. The anxiety started where I would wake up every morning with increased heart rate and,
Oh.
just feeling like I'm gonna just vomit every day. And like, I couldn't I physically, I felt like I was having a heart attack. That anxiety lasted every morning for like a month. As it was happening, I was like, I don't think this is baby blues. I was Googling, what is this? So that's when I was learning about postpartum anxiety and depression. And I had symptoms and episodes of psychosis, but I found out much later that's what it was. But at the time, I thought it was all depression.
How would you describe the psychosis symptoms, like amidst all of that?
One of the first things that started to happen was I started to not sleep. Once we brought the baby home, every night I had my husband, my mom-in-law to help. I tried breastfeeding for about 2 weeks, didn't work out. She was losing weight. She was already born underweight. So we decided to go straight to formula after 2 weeks. I had a lot of help overnight feedings. They would take the baby in a different room, but I wouldn't sleep. I would be awake for hours. I would go in the room at 9 p.m. and then get up at like 5 a.m. My husband's like, did you not sleep? Because he would sleep in a different room just to not disturb me. And I'm like, no, I didn't. And I would take a shower and I would go back in the bed. The no sleeping led to the hallucinations and the delusions and led me to have suicidal thoughts and ideations. And again, I don't know what came first, but it was all intermingled. That first month, every few days, something would happen. I opened a kitchen drawer and I was looking at knives. The knives started to like get up and do a little dance. And I was like, okay, let's close the drawer and walk away. One of the nights I was holding my baby, and feeding her in my room. We had a 4-poster bed at the time. And as I'm walking back and forth, rocking her after I've bottle fed her, I had a vision of me standing and hitting her head against the 4-poster bed. And I'm holding on to her so tightly. And I'm like, okay. And I put her down in her crib and I ran outside and I called my husband. I was like, you need to come inside. There is another me doing this. Throughout this whole process, it was my husband that I was telling mostly about my hallucinations and delusions. And so, he was doing his best. Finally, I told a good friend of mine, and she's like, I think you need to see a therapist and, let's get you a medication. You might need medication for your anxiety, for your sleeping. Nobody knew it was psychosis. We were calling it anxiety. We were calling it depression. I did not feel comfortable sharing with my GP or my pediatrician these delusions or hallucinations. I was afraid I would be called crazy, psychotic. I was
Yeah.
afraid of what might happen with me and my baby separating us. When I met with my OB and my pediatrician, I told them that I wasn't sleeping. I was in bed crying all day. I had the severe anxiety attacks. With my OB, we didn't go into too much of a detailed conversation because I did not trust her after the first visit where she was like, oh, you had a traumatic birth, you'll be fine. So I think the second or third visit, I wasn't sharing as much. Then my pediatrician, I think it was my daughter's 6-week appointment, was like, what's going on? You don't look too good. And I told her about what's been happening. She's like, okay, I think you have postpartum depression and anxiety. Here's a therapist and you need to get on medication. And so to this day, she was my daughter's pediatrician till my daughter turned 10. And so when I started this
Oh.
journey, I was telling her about this and she's like, oh my goodness, I'm so happy for you. And I told her, I was like, you were the first person to recognize and diagnose and get me going and help me with what the next step should be. Eventually, I had to move in with my mom because she lived an hour away at the time. And we lived near our family business. So my husband stayed behind and I took my daughter and I moved in with my mom, who lived closer to my sister. My sister would watch my baby, who's now maybe 6 to 7 weeks or 8 weeks, and I would take care of myself. I had to go for walks every day. My sister and I did a little postpartum health plan. She was like, every day you're going to go for a walk, eat
Yeah.
these fruits and grains, journal and meditate. I always thank my older sister for being there for me. My mom took care of the baby and I took care of myself, and my sister did a little bit of both. And when I would go for these walks, one of the days I went for a walk and everything was black and white. It was probably
Mm.
like day 20 or 30 of not sleeping, right? It was really crazy. That's when I was like, oh my God, I can't see color anymore. And that's also one of the days that I kind of lost speech. She would send my nephew to go for walks with me just to make sure that I would be okay. He was like 5 and it was summer. We would be outside my mom's house and I was only allowed to walk a few houses up and down. I told him, I was like, I don't know what that thing is in front of us. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, what is that big old, and I was talking about a tree, but the word couldn't come to me. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. What is that thing in front of me? So yeah, like that one day I was seeing things in black and white. I was slurring. I couldn't think of words. And then I went back in and I was like, okay, I'm going to go to a therapist. Even after my pediatrician diagnosed me, gave me the therapist's phone number, I didn't want to. I was like, I have no
Oh,
time. I don't need
yeah.
to. I'm at my mom's house now. I'll be fine. I'll be taken care of here. My sister's helping me with all these things. And the stigma of South Asian families needing a therapist was on me. And so I didn't do it. But after that day, I called her and I was like, I need to come see you. And then the journey of that healing started. But it was almost 2 months of living in postpartum depression, anxiety, and psychosis before I even got help.
So you were already helping, you were doing lifestyle changes, you were getting more support with baby. And then it was, things weren't like totally improving. And then you sought help through a therapist. Um,
Yes.
did you get some type of SSRI or anything as well to help?
Yes, yes. So
Okay.
within my first therapist appointment, she immediately prescribed me Zoloft for the anxiety. And keep in
Uh,
mind, I did not tell the therapist either about my psychosis episodes. I was very scared because I didn't know what was happening to me.
right.
And those were just 100% unlike me. And again, I knew enough about depression. And at that time, I had learned a lot about anxiety because I had the actual palpitations and so forth and the daily worry. So yeah, so she prescribed me Zoloft for the anxiety. The Zoloft helped the anxiety, which helped me to start sleeping again. And the
Yay.
sleep, oh my goodness, the sleep. When that came, I woke up like, oh my God, like this is, oh, hi, it's me again. And that was amazing. But that first therapist and I didn't gel as well. So think I saw her for like a month or two, and then I switched to another therapist. The second one was fine. It was okay. Both of these therapists had very little to no experience in postpartum mental health or
Oh,
perinatal mental health. And so now I know what it is to talk with a woman who has that experience. Oh my goodness. If I had known, then I would have searched for one. If I was just searching
yeah.
for one with mental health, postpartum depression.
Yeah.
And so I think that first year I saw a total of 3 therapists and I was on Zoloft for 3 months. Yeah.
And that helped you get to baseline again. You've
Yes.
been, that's amazing. Yeah. I've also had to shop therapists and jump around. And I feel that's important because there's so many types of therapy and different flavors of therapists. And so give it a try, keep trying until you find one that gels. I wanted to double click into some of these hallucinations and delusions you mentioned. Did you notice any type of theme or pattern in your symptoms?
For me, it was mostly either to hurt myself or hurt my baby. That's another reason why that first month I was like, anybody that can take care of her would be great because I'm having such wild thoughts that I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like these were scaring you. Like you were aware of them
Yes.
and the nature of it being scary.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
okay. So you shared in your write up that you learned about postpartum psychosis through a webinar. Can you share more
Yes.
about what that was like for you?
Oh my goodness. So I started volunteering with PSI. My twins had just almost turned 3. Since they were 2, I wanted to join PSI, but I didn't have the guts or enough
Yeah.
information. And I was like, I don't know what this is. Then I joined PSI for both reasons. For my own healing, I wanted to join a support group. And then I learned that I could train to be a support group coach. So I did that. And that first year of volunteering for PSI, I was so into the education part. So I was
Mm.
constantly just taking any training or webinar or any kind of teaching they were offering through their website, through their virtual trainings. And so one of them was a webinar hosted by
Mm.
PSI about psychosis. And so it was purely for my education, for my own learning. That first year, when I was doing all the volunteer work, I pretty much self-taught myself about postpartum mental health because I just had to learn and get more in. And it just completely pulled me in when I realized how big of a nationwide problem it is and how so many moms don't speak up, get the right help, get the right treatment. It fired something inside of me to where I'm like, no, I want to learn more about this. So that webinar, I'm sitting there and I was like, oh, postpartum psychosis. I wonder what that is. Let me just, a new type of mental health illness. So I sat in that webinar purely to learn. I had goosebumps the whole hour when they were
Mm.
sharing their stories. I highly recommend this webinar. 3 to 4 moms share lived experiences of their postpartum psychosis. And then they had some panel experts explaining it. The whole hour, I was just like goosebumps. My mouth was like, I went through some of this. Oh my God. This is called postpartum psychosis. This is a diagnosable mental health condition. There's treatment. There's other people who went through this. So shortly after that, I contacted some of the women who did that webinar and I got in touch with some of my mentors and my earlier connections in PSI. I was like, I need to learn more about this. What is this postpartum psychosis? And then that year, I got in touch with the postpartum psychosis task force and just kind of learned that what happened to me in 2014 was this. That's what I had 10 years ago. It was life changing. And it was also like, wow, now I understand whatever I went through was not just me. I was losing my mind, but not on my own and not from my own will. I wasn't a horrible person. I wasn't a bad mom. It completely was justifiable. There was medical science, everything related. It all was coming together all these years
Yeah.
later. And I was like, this is mind blowing to me. So yeah, I still can't believe that at the time, my pediatrician, my OB, my 2, 3 therapists, nobody had picked up on it, but rightfully so. I wasn't sharing it. Since the
Yeah.
last 3 years, what I've shared about postpartum psychosis, I never did. Only my husband, a handful of friends, my sisters, nobody else knew. But now I want more people to know because I want them to
Hmm.
speak up.
Know that it happens and you can
Yes,
talk about it.
yes.
Yeah. So you had this really intense birth experience with your first. What was it like having a second pregnancy after that?
Because of what happened after my first, we decided to be one and done. My
Okay.
husband is an only child, and I'm from a family of 3 girls. He always wanted 2 kids, and I would have been fine 1 or 2 kids. But after what happened, we were done. My daughter turned 3 or 4, and I felt like my mom confidence came back. And I was like, oh, actually, I like parenting. I'm a good mom, and this can be great. So let's do this again. So she was 4 and we decided to have another one. We were older and I was like, oh my goodness, this is going to be a lot, but let's do it. And so we didn't want to waste any time. I was 37. So we were like, let's just go straight for another IUI. And I got pregnant with twins. We were only planning for one more. We still had our business. I knew that I would be needing the help of a nanny babysitter. My husband wouldn't be around as much. And so that pregnancy was rough. In an IUI, there's a 1 in 1,000 chance to have a twin pregnancy. It's IVFs that are higher chances, not in an IUI. And so it was just a miracle, right? And it really bogged me the whole pregnancy. We were so scared. We were like, how are we going to do this financially, support? I already went through so much after my first one with postpartum mental health issues. So it was a really rough pregnancy, but around the 3 or 4 month mark, because I spend most of the pregnancy depressed, I decided to be like, this is happening. They're coming. So then I created a postpartum plan. I sat down with my sisters, my husband, my in-laws, my parents. I said, when they are born, here's what's going to happen. You guys are all going to take shifts. I'm not doing this alone. I didn't do it alone after I had my first one, but that's how I was meant to do it, according to culture, family, society. And that was another reason why I felt so much depression, because I felt so much guilt that I kept asking for help and I shouldn't have after my first one. And so I said, this time I do not want to feel guilty. I don't want to think I have to do it all. I'm not going to do it all. It's 3 against 1. We are going to do it together. So I said, we're going to do shifts and I'm going to move in with my mom from the beginning. I told my in-laws and my husband, you guys are going to take care of our little girl who's 5 now. And I'm going to go with my parents. I told my sisters, we're all going to take shifts and I'm going to get a nanny to start within 3 or 4 weeks after I deliver. And I said, I'm going to go for postpartum massages and meditation and therapy. And I'm also going to do whatever else I need or want. And my family was like, okay, you calm down. I was like, no, this is the calmest I've ever been. Let's do this. So the last 2 months, I looked at my postpartum plan. I got a therapist. I got a new OB. I delivered closer to my mom, moved in with my mom a month before. And I was like, okay, I can do this. And right after delivery, I had a beautiful delivery and they were born 7 pounds each. And it was amazing. I was able to breastfeed for about a week or so, which I couldn't even earlier. And they were the happiest babies ever. And within a few weeks, I started all the crying and the moaning. And I was like, I cannot feel depression. Why am I feeling depression again? I have my postpartum plan. But I was more in the know. I was aware and I just went with it. I went with it. The anxiety started as well, the heart palpitations and the panic attacks every morning. Sleep was an issue, but I decided to take naps throughout the day, which I never did with the first one. And even if they weren't sleeping, but I got sleepy, I'd be like, okay, mom or dad or sister or friend, here you go. And I'm going to go sleep. And then we got the nanny within like the first month. Throughout the pregnancy, we budgeted for it. I told my husband, I was like, I know that you're thinking you have your mom and my sister and you should be fine. Nope. The moms and grandmoms are older. My sisters have, more fulfilling jobs. And I need somebody that I can be like, we're in this together, because my husband couldn't provide that. He was working. When the nanny came, that was a game changer. It was so nice to be like, okay, I have that 100% support and no guilt. I was able to sleep and do all the things and the therapy right away. And so I would say my postpartum depression anxiety lasted maybe 3 to 4 months. And I had medication ready, but I never got on it. I had maybe like one night where I couldn't sleep all night and I felt a lot of rage and upset. And I was like, okay, am I going to have some sort of psychosis episode? That was after my twins were 2 months that I felt really upset and ragey. And I felt like I was, losing my mind because I wasn't able to sleep for 3 or 4 days. But then I got sleep shortly after that and focused on sleep, fresh air, doing things I wanted, and therapy. I didn't have psychosis after the twins, but the depression and anxiety were there no matter how much I planned, but in a shorter amount of time. And I was aware of it. And even though I was crying a lot and upset a lot, I also knew that there was light at the end of the tunnel. There was therapy, there was resources, and I could get better. And that's when I discovered PSI. And I wish I had discovered them way before. The whole finding peer support and group support was not something I knew about till after the twins.
I love that you sat your family down and told them what was up, like what
Yes.
was going to happen. Can you share more about a postpartum plan and how you crafted that?
Yeah, sure. So I remembered so much of what helped me after my first one. All the things that didn't help, I also remembered all the things that helped. When I had moved in with my mom after my firstborn, my sister and I sat down. Every day I would wake up and not know what to do. I had no will, no energy, no desire to take care of me, my baby, anything. My sister and I would sit down and she would say, okay, in the morning, you're going to do this, go for a walk. In the afternoon, you're going to journal. Then you're going to watch a funny show. And then you'll play with the baby for a little while. And so we created that when I was so depressed and anxious and, full of hallucinations. Then when I was pregnant, I was like, oh, okay, I remember that. So I sat down while I was 5 or 6 months pregnant and I just kind of Googled it a little bit, but I already knew what were the things that I wanted to do or wish I could have done after my first birth, but I didn't. And so I put down therapy, postpartum massages, go for walks on my own, sleep. So I put those few things down. And then I added a couple of new things like meditation, or I want to spend some time with my babies with nobody else around, And then I also put in like, I'm not going to stress about how much they sleep. I'm not going to stress about how much they eat. I'm not going to stress about they should be at this milestone. Because after my first, poor thing, she had colic and she had acid reflux and she had the flat head. So she had to wear a helmet. And so it was
Oh,
a lot. And so I was like,
yeah.
it is what it is with the twins, right? Whatever they are going to go through, I cannot add that on my plate as well because
Mm.
I know that I'm at risk again for any postpartum. So, yeah, the birth plan was like, these are the things that you're going to do daily, weekly. This is what's going to happen mentally, So, yeah.
Yeah, if you were to give advice to someone who was expecting and wants to create a plan, how would you recommend they make one themselves?
I would tell them, you know, first write a list of the things that you want to continue after you give birth, whether it may be a weekly coffee date with a friend, 3 days a week exercise. Like, make a list of all the things you want to continue for yourself that you have been doing even after birth. Then make a list of things and resources that that are in your community, right? Like you want to attend a mommy and me group with your baby, or you want to attend a support group just for new moms. Figure out actual resources and things in your community that speak to you. And then I would say three, create like a little schedule that you're not going to follow hardcore, but you can fall back to it. 8 a.m. feed, 10 a.m. go for a walk, noon, watch a show, 1 p.m. call somebody to watch the baby so you can do something for yourself. Just have a little daily schedule and add yourself in there, add fun in there, add time with baby, add time with spouse, your relationships, add time for whatever brings you joy, along with community help, support, peer support, and these are the people I can call if needed. Like if I'm having a day and it's just me, who can I call? And then call those people, let them know they're on your list. There are so many postpartum workbooks and pregnancy workbooks out there. There's birth plans and postpartum plans, but I would curate it to your life.
I have a couple of postpartum planning resources linked in the show notes if you are interested, if you're expecting, recently delivered, or planning to become pregnant soon. Love this idea and recommend carving out time to think through the prompts and getting creative where answers don't come easily, and doing the research to know what is available to you in your area. It's brilliant. I feel like I focused on a birth plan and I did not have a postpartum plan myself. Speaking of what is available to you and me, let's talk about therapy. Psychological support can make a difference in recovery when it comes to perinatal mood and anxiety disorders and prevention. A large meta-analysis looked at over 250 studies. These are real-world therapy sessions, not lab experiments. They looked at how effective psychological treatment was for things like depression, anxiety, and general distress. Across the board, therapy works. The average person showed big improvements from before to after treatment. For depression, it was a pretty large effect size, and for anxiety, slightly smaller, but still strong. And for overall well-being, that had the strongest effect size. Results varied a lot depending on where and how therapy was delivered. Some patterns that stand out: qualified therapists get better results than trainees. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, tends to be the most effective in this review, especially for anxiety and general distress compared to unstructured or psychodynamic approaches. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a structured, goal-oriented form of talk therapy that helps people identify and change unhelpful patterns in their thoughts and behaviors to improve mood and coping. And as you're looking for therapists, you can see what modalities they lean on, what they're trained in, and CBT is quite common. Another pattern: people with milder symptoms often showed bigger improvements than those with more severe issues. And there were some variations in region. So apparently UK-based programs had the strongest effects compared to mainland Europe or Asia. So, since these were pre to post comparisons, not randomized controlled trials, the results don't prove cause and effect, but they do give us strong real world evidence that psychotherapy, particularly CBT, can make a big difference for most people struggling with depression or anxiety. Let's hear Jigna's reflections on how experiencing PMADS impacted her.
I look at every woman who's trying to become a mom, who's pregnant, and who's postpartum with such a different lens. I immediately want to tell her, whether she's a friend, a relative, a stranger, or somebody in my network or community, that, hey, you need anything? I'm here for you. And if I'm not, there's so much there for you. Just make sure that you're able to speak up, reach out, and know you're not alone. Know that you are a wonderful mom already, and just seek support, seek help. You deserve it. Every woman I look at that's in, like I said, either trying to get pregnant, or I see them with a new baby, I'm immediately like, even if a woman doesn't go through the full gamut of everything that I went through, most of my friends didn't go through what I went through, but they go through being a new mom. It's a life change. I love learning about matrescence, and I'm constantly telling all my friends and relatives about it. Every woman goes through it. You're literally stepping into a whole new life. You're being born again, and you're going to be living another life. It's all kinds of jumbled layers of different feelings, emotions, and experiences. Now I can't see a woman without thinking about what she's going through, what she's going to go through, and for her to know that she's going to be able to do this with the right amount of education, knowledge, and support. So, yeah, it's completely changed my outlook on women and mothering and what we're capable of.
Yeah, yeah, this intrinsic kinship, it sounds like. I feel
Yes.
that too. How would you describe your mental health today?
You know, I about 3 years ago, one of my twins got diagnosed with autism. This year, I got back into therapy, and I talked to a lot of my other friends. We all have kids around the same ages, between 13 to like 3, 4 year olds, and
Mhm.
I realized that once you become a mom, right, and you are with these brand new souls, like, you will forever need support. Your relationships are going to be evolving, and you're going to be evolving. Personally, with mental health, I am still, completely realizing that it's still something that I want support in. I still get anxiety, right? And I still stress out a lot. I have depressive days, but I feel so much stronger because I know what it is, and I know how to get help, and I
Mhm.
know that it's not me, but it's okay that I'm still going through it, and it's okay for me to have bad days. And I tell my friends that all the time. I tell all of the new moms that I work with, because a lot of the new moms will ask me, when will I feel better? Will I ever feel better? I was like, yes, you will. But then motherhood brings challenges, and you will find yourself going through the ups and downs, and it's okay. And you're allowed to have days and weeks or whatever it may be, as long as you're able to seek help and get the education and keep moving forward. And I think that we are not able to be devoid of complete mental health stability in today's day and age, with everything that's happening and can happen for our own personal small family and the bigger world. So I think better to be okay with knowing that you're going to be a roller coaster,
Mhm.
and just take care of yourself and continuously take care of yourself. And so I tell myself that I know I used to wait and think, when am I going to be completely healed and free of any sort of mental health issues? But now I'm like, no, I'm not. And that's okay. I
Yeah.
rather allow myself the right to feel and go through it. And then also allow myself to be like, okay, I'm going to learn from this, and I'm going to grow from this, and I'm going to take a day off, and then I'm going to be okay the next day or a few days later. But it's an ongoing thing. And so I have now learned that the goal is to not be completely 100% healed, but to learn how to keep healing while still functioning and being yourself in the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, I think the human experience is meant to be a breadth of experiences. And I agree wholeheartedly. It's powerful to have the language and ability to identify these
Yeah.
things in ourselves because it's communication, right?
Yeah.
Like anxiety can be, there's utility there sometimes,
Yeah.
sometimes not.
Yes.
Um, so I love that. Cheers to that.
Thank
Um,
you.
I've just really enjoyed this conversation and having you on. You've given us so much great advice for families navigating mood and anxiety disorders. What advice would you give to someone who's recently been through postpartum psychosis? What other advice?
Um, I would tell them that join a community of other survivors of other lived experience. It will be a forever resource to open new layers of what happened to you. I feel like anybody who's gone through postpartum psychosis or any of the other PMADs, it's a forever healing journey. And you want to be around other psychosis survivors because they will make you feel so seen, so heard, and they will make you realize that you are 100% not alone. And what you went through is just one aspect of your life, and it doesn't define you, but it will create you into the human being you are now and the strength
Yeah.
that will give you. Because I know one theme across the board for all the postpartum psychosis survivors and lived experience that I've met is all of us women feel like we were worthless, like we were bad people, bad women, so guilty.
Failures.
But
Yeah.
it's failures, but it's the opposite. It's the 100% opposite. And all of these moms are even stronger than they've ever been as they're going through this journey because it's a journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I would tell the psychosis survivors that find the community. We are here and we want to be there for each other.
Yes. Thank you so much. I agree. And I will link, the PSI and yours, and there are so
Yes.
many options. So find one that fits.
Of course.
Thank you so much for the
Thank
time.
you.
I
Yes.
really enjoyed having you on.
I love that you're doing this podcast. This is amazing. I read a little bit about you. I've started to listen to your podcast. You sound amazing, and I'm so proud of you and everything you're doing. And thank you for
Oh,
doing this work for our community and women with psychosis. I'm looking forward to following you. I put you on my everyday list of podcasts.
oh, thank you. Thank
Of
you. And thanks
course.
for coming on. So grateful to Jigyna for sharing her story here and for all her efforts to support those navigating mental health struggles. I love her reminder that mental health is an ongoing journey. It's not something you solve for or check a box on. Even after the most serious symptoms clear, like with postpartum psychosis, life still comes with ups and downs. We all have periods of stress, difficulty sleeping, or low mood, and that's part of being human. The goal isn't perfection, it's awareness, support, and compassion for ourselves through the different seasons of life. If you're looking for extra support, group peer support is a wonderful resource that I hadn't heard of. It has various free or low-cost peer groups, it looks like. Each one may be sponsored in partnership with other organizations, but are centrally marketed and displayed on Group Peer Support's website. I actually just registered for one myself. To check it out, you can find a link to their groups in the show notes. And that is a wrap. If you'd like updates on the show, you can sign up for a mailing list at mombreakspodcast.com or email me at mombreakspodcast@gmail.com to be added to our budding Discord channel. I have been getting great feedback on the show, and I want to build stronger ways to hear from you all, including listener submissions that I'm dreaming up. So let me know. Thank you for listening. Remember to be kind to your mind.